All right. Good morning and welcome to the Pulse Variety Seminar. My name is Laurie Friesen. I am the Seed Program Manager here at SPG, and I'll be your host for today. SPG is guided by a grower-elected board of directors working to provide leadership and create opportunities for profitable growth for Saskatchewan pulses. One of SPG's 4 focus areas is to increase the profitability of established pulse crops and expand pulse crop options for Saskatchewan growers. So this event focuses on topics that support this focus area. For those in attendance, if you provided a CCA number at the time of your registration, SPG will apply on your behalf to ensure you receive your CEU credits. Also watch for an email from us following this event, as it will include a link to watch the recording. We will be using Slido to accept questions for today's presenters. Simply go to slido.com on your computer, phone, or tablet and enter the event code 3841641. Click Join Event and enter your questions in the Q&A tab anytime throughout these presentations. We will address all questions at the Q&A session following our presentations. All right, so I first want to review some upcoming pulse varieties. I'll just get my presentation up here. There we go. So, new and upcoming pulse varieties. It's unusual for me to start with a pulse quality program, but I'm going to introduce this because I'm going to be referring to the pulse quality program throughout my presentation. So I thought, well, let's introduce it now, and then you'll understand where the data is coming from. So this program started in 2021. SPG initiated this program and as looking at seed quality traits. And all of the samples come from the regional variety trials. So we get all the varieties and multiple environments. Phase 2 is just starting now, and this is a collaboration between SPG, Pulse Canada, with funding from Agri-Assurance. And this will be looking at functionality traits, so things like total starch, dietary fiber, and things like that. That'll be useful for processors and end-use markets. And all the reports can be found on our SPG website. So we'll begin with peas. So if we're looking at trends in yellow pea acres, this graph shows the varieties, the sort of the trend in the percent of acres of yellow peas over time, in this case 2017 to 2025. Old varieties, which is largely CDC Meadow, as well as Amarillo, have been steadily declining in favor of newer varieties, some of the recently established ones like AAC Carver, CDC Inca, and CDC Spectrum. So those are the red ones. And then in green, we're starting to see uptake of new and upcoming varieties such as CDC Hickey, AAC Julius, and AAC Chrome. So we're seeing progress in the uptake of new varieties, but there's still 23% of acres to CDC Meadow. So we're hoping that more growers will take advantage of newer genetics. If you look at, this is a graph that just shows the relative ranking of varieties in the north and the south, with the highest yielding varieties showing up on the top. And all of the highest yielding ones are the newer genetics. You're seeing CDC Engage, CDC Boundless, AAC Aberdeen, Citron, CDC Citron, all at the top, whereas CDC Meadow in the red box there is right at the bottom, only above golden. So it is time to consider new genetics. So we look at some of the recent ones, and we can see there's some good solid yield in these varieties. And I did a statistical analysis to find out for each variety in a head-to-head analysis to see how it yields compared to the Czech, in this case CDC Amarillo. And all of these 4 varieties were highly significant different from the Czech. So in this case where there's plus signs, that means it's significantly better than the Czech. And the more plus signs, the better, with the maximum being 3. So these are all highly significantly better. So it's more evidence that these are good options. And CDC Liwachko and AAC Profit are also high protein, which is good for targeting those markets. Looking at ones that will have certified seed this spring, we see another lineup of very solid varieties. Boost is not quite as high yielding, but it is a high protein line, so it's something to consider for that purpose. The first two varieties here, AAC Beyond and AAC Julius, are both early maturity, so that might be something worth considering. And then we have Citron and Tollefson here, both significantly higher yielding than the Czech. And so the other thing that you can see here is that we've got good yield in both the north and south geographies for a lot of these varieties, which indicates good yield stability. Looking a little further down the road, again, there's a really good lineup of varieties. A couple with the asterisks here have high protein, ProStar, CDC 5791, and AAC McMurphy. And we see that 3 of these varieties, again, are significantly better than the Czech. And it is difficult to get significant differences between varieties. And that's because there's so many variables that impact the performance of the varieties. So many environmental, timing of rain, soil conditions, variation across the field, management practices. There's so many things that can cause variability that it's difficult to pick out statistically which ones are better. So when you see that they are statistically better, that's a really good evidence that they're good varieties. It just increases your confidence. One of the things that we look at in our pulse quality program is greenness in yellow peas. This is a 2-year summary of data. You can see there's 2 varieties that are a little bit worse for greenness. They have significantly higher greenness, and those are CDC Inca and CDC Tollefson, so something to think about there. And then at the other end, we have CDC Citron and AAC Julius, which are significantly better than some of the other varieties. And more years of data as we go along will help build the confidence in this data. If we look at green pea acres, we've got the varieties along the bottom. So for each variety, there are 4 bars indicating the year. So you can see that there is quite a dramatic drop in acres of the old varieties such as CDC Striker, CDC Razor. CDC Limerick stays a little higher, but it has such good green color that a lot of growers are still staying with that one. CDC Greenwater dropping off, but we see CDC Spruce increasing, a more recent variety. Now CDC Forest here at the end was became the dominant variety, and because it's a very high yielding green pea, it's a good variety, but it does have some issues with bleaching, and that may be why it's dropped off a bit in favor of CDC Spruce. And there's 2 more newcomers to the list, CDC Rider and CDC Husky, and CDC Husky is expected to take over as a dominant variety going forward. So just looking at those 2 varieties, we see that CDC Husky is very high yielding, again, both geographies, and is significantly better than the yellow pea Czech CDC Amarillo. So that's really important because traditionally green peas weren't that much higher yielding, or weren't typically higher yielding than yellow peas. CDC Rider is not as high yielding and is significantly lower than the Czech. But again, both are good varieties. The bottom graph here just shows comparisons of bleaching. Again, this is from data from our pulse quality program. And this does, again, emphasize that CDC Forest has significantly higher bleaching than the other 3, which are all very low. So those will have better color retention. Another thing that we look at in the pulse quality program is seed coat breakage. So we tasked the program with finding a standardized method for testing seed coat breakage, which they did. These are jewelry polishers with a little rotating drum. We put the seed in there along with some metal beads, and it's supposed to mimic some of the handling during harvest, and then measure seed coat breakage. And this is a 2-year summary of the data. And you can see CDC Amarillo is the only one that's significantly worse at this stage. And again, more years of data, we'll start to maybe see a little bit more differences among varieties. Protein in yellow peas is also, well, protein in all of the pulse crops is measured in the pulse quality program. And we can see some differences here, CAFORN and CDC Luwachko, AAC Julius near the top. And then at the lower end is CDC Inca and CDC 5845. And this is from 3 years of data. But one of the important things to consider is that it is highly variable between years and by location. So it's highly influenced by environment. And just as an example here, this little bottom graph shows protein content by year, and you can see that protein in 2024 and 2022 was significantly higher than it was in 2023. So environmental conditions weren't optimum that year. And further looking at this, we have 6 locations here along the bottom, and then 4 bars for each location indicating a different variety. So we have CAFORN here in the dark blue, which is high protein line, and CDC Luwachko, also high protein. The Czech Amarillo, and then in the green is CDC Inca, which is a low protein line. So here at Glasson, it's kind of what you'd expect. But then at Lucky Lake, for some reason, all of a sudden, CDC Inca and CDC Luwachko have about the same protein, even though there was a significant difference between them. At Outlook, it's again more typical of what you'd see, but for some reason at Scott, CAFORN was lower protein than the Czech Amarillo. Luwachko was back where you'd expect. So, even though you can say that some are higher, they're definitely higher protein, it is going to be variable by location and environment. Okay, moving on to lentils. So if we look at acres of small red lentil by variety, this CDC Maxim in the dark navy or line here, you can see it's been steadily dropping, and it is a much lower yielding line, but it's been slow to get growers to move on to new genetics. However, we could see there was a big rise in new varieties, CDC Proclaim and CDC Impulse in particular, in the red line, but that is starting to taper off with a fairly fast uptake of new varieties, CDC Simi and CDC Nimble. And that's really exciting to see because it's good to see higher yielding varieties getting good uptake. And I've got this little smash symbol here to show that it's kind of on a collision course with these varieties expected to overtake CDC Maxim. So if we look at the recent red lentil varieties, the 4 that are listed here, it is hard to get a significant difference over CDC Nimble. It's a very strong variety. So there's a couple here that are lower yielding, and then ones that are CDC Impulse is about equivalent. But when we compare in a head-to-head statistical analysis versus CDC Maxim, you can see that these are all highly significantly better than Maxim. So anywhere from 6 to 11% higher than Maxim. So again, some really good evidence that these are higher yielding varieties. A couple that will have certified seed starting this spring. CDC 6928 is small red lentil, yields about equivalent to CDC Nimble. Again, compared to Maxim in head-to-head analysis, about 16% higher, and that is a highly significant yield increase. CDC Monarch is unique as it is a large red lentil, but it is the highest yielding red lentil right now available. It yields 111% of CDC Nimble in the south. And if we look at the head-to-head data, and there's 6 years of data here with 37 trials, we can see it still yields quite a bit higher, but even more so, it is significantly better than CDC Nimble. As we saw earlier, it's hard to get varieties that are significantly better than Nimble. And against Maxim, it's 122% of Maxim, of course, highly significant. But you can see from the 1,000 kernel weight here, it is a large red lentil, 51 for the seed weight. Here's a photo showing the difference in seed size. So just recommend that you're sure that you have a buyer for these before you put seed in the ground. And some up-and-coming ones, I've just listed a few here. I was just going to point out CDC Sienna, which is a brand new one, and it has it is a conventional lentil, but it might be good for growers that are, struggling with group 2 resistant weeds and are looking at other herbicide options. And I wanted to point out that it is significantly better than Nimble as well. And then, of course, all of them have very high yield improvements over CDC Maxim. And again, all of those are significant. And then further down the road, just a quick peek at some of that are up and coming. You can see that there's going to be some high yielding varieties. This is just regional variety trial data. And then two I was going to point out here, CDC Onyx and CDC Phoenix are small red lentils, but they have a black seed coat, as you can see by the photo. So they'll be quite unique. If we look at large green lentils, we can see that the older varieties, mainly CDC Greenland, are steadily dropping off, and that's the light blue line. CDC Green Star in the dark blue has stayed fairly level, but that is still a very strong variety. It's a non-IMI tolerant varieties, but growers still like it, and it is a very high yielding and has good green color. So it'll likely stick around, which is just fine. But we are seeing a strong increase in CDC Lima, which is the red bars. And so this one is also about equivalent to CDC Green Star, but it has the clear field trait. And then just starting to see CDC Grim come onto the scene. So looking at Grim and Lima, again, a little bit lower in the dark brown and brown soil zones versus Green Star, but higher in the black and gray soil zones. So, fairly similar, but they have the advantage of the clear field trait for those who are still using that herbicide. Up and coming is CDC 7757. This one will be definitely one to watch for, as it has seen yields of up to 6% higher than CDC Green Star. So keep an eye out for that one. Small green lentils are, we're seeing quite a switch here, because if you look at CDC Invincible, has been the dominant variety for years. Still occupies 36% of acres, but there's been a rapid uptake of CDC Jiminy. And this one is a high yielding clear field small red lentil that's now at 49% of acres. But there are still new varieties coming. So here we see against CDC Jiminy, there are no significantly higher yielding varieties at this point, but CDC Jiminy is really hard to beat. But we're looking at some early data here, and hopefully, we'll start to see some differences. And I was going to point out CDC Cricket, because that's a small green lentil that has quite high yield. And just to mention that is also a conventional line, but might be worth considering. So chickpeas. So again, looking at acres, CDC Leader has long dominated acres, and it is trending down, but it's still at 44% of acres. We're seeing uptake of CDC Lancer and CDC Orkney in the yellow line, and more recently CDC Pasqua and CDC Pearl. And these are higher yielding varieties by quite a bit versus CDC Leader. So here we did looked at head-to-head comparisons versus CDC Leader, and all of them have highly significant or significant improvements in yield versus CDC Leader. The only one that doesn't is CDC Pasqua. It is a lower yielding variety, significantly lower than CDC Lancer. However, it has a large seed size and under good conditions can reach the 10 millimeter size. So that's why growers are starting to adopt that variety. Also unique is CDC Pearl, because it has a small seed size, and it is a good yielding variety that has found markets in the canning market. So that's a good one to watch out for. And then we have all these other varieties, CDC Climax, CDC Hardy, that are worth considering as well. And just noting that we also look at chickpea seed size in the pulse quality program. And this data, shows the evidence that CDC Pasqua has the largest seed size, significantly larger than everything else. and CDC Pearl at the other end with the small seed. Now moving on to Faba bean. So we can see the trends in acres by variety. So the blue line is snowbird, sorry, and it has been the dominant variety, but in 2023 started to drop off and continued to drop off, and that is in favor of the low Visine convisine variety Fabel. And we are encouraging growers to switch over to low Visine convisine varieties, as that's where the industry is going. And Fabel, although it is a tannin variety, it is on the much lower end of tannin compared to other tannin varieties. So it actually is being used in feed markets as well. So it's being adopted by quite a few growers. And then the white flowered variety Navi and more recently CDC 1142 are just starting to gain acres. So if we look at these varieties in the white flowered, low tannin, these are all low Visine convisine varieties again. And we can see that some of these are significantly higher than Snowbird. And, one of the things that people have talked about is, well, we need something that's better than Snowbird before we'll move away from that variety. Well, this is evidence that that Navi, CDC 1310, and CDC 1089 are all significantly better, higher yielding. 1142 doesn't show significance right now, but it is still quite a bit higher yielding. And if we look at maturity, Navi is a later maturing variety, whereas these ones here, particularly the 3 numbered variety lines, are lower, 4 to 5 days earlier, although they're still 2 days later than Snowbird. So that's the one thing to look at. And Juno is a newer variety that we don't have any head-to-head data with Snowbird. It was never tested against Snowbird, but it looks like it's going to be a strong yielding variety. In the colored flower tannin Faba bean, there's several new ones coming up and coming, and want to point out Pitura and Hammer, both of which have high yield versus Fabel. And in looking at statistical analysis, should point out that Hammer is significantly higher yielding than Fabel, so it'll be one to watch out for. Should have seed in 27 or 2028, and that one is worth considering. Victus is interesting in that it has a smaller seed size for this type of Faba bean. And also Dosis, I wanted to point out that it is an earlier maturing tannin Faba bean. So again, one to consider. All right, so now I want to talk about SPG's Pulse Variety Hub. So this is an exciting decision-making tool for growers. So we have put in all the regional variety trial data into an accessible variety hub where we have data from 2010 to 2025. So for older varieties, we have up to 16 years of data in there. A variety to go into the hub must have a minimum of 3 years of data, and that's so that we have a robust enough data set. So right now we have over 6,500 variety by location by year entries in the hub. So there's a lot of data, 40 locations and representing 115 varieties of pea, lentil, chickpea, faba bean, and dry bean. The hub is updated annually and allows growers to compare pulse variety data across locations and years. We've also now added in some weather data so you can see how varieties compete under ideal conditions versus less than optimum. So it's kind of a risk management tool in that if something really competes well and beats everybody else when conditions are ideal, but maybe not as good under less optimum, not as competitive, you can decide whether you want to take a risk or whether you'd rather have something that's kind of steady, both under ideal and optimum, and maybe under, or less than optimum. If it's more competitive, it might be a safer bet if you want to lower your risk. So this is good data to consider. And we're also adding in data from our pulse quality program, seed quality traits, protein, and seed coat breakage data will be added in as well. So where do you find it? So if you go to SPG's website, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the home page, there is a link to click on in the black area at the bottom. Or you can go under Growing Pulses, and then you get the drop-down menu, and at the bottom, there's a link to get to the Pulse Variety Hub. So you can start with looking at varieties and select trials to compare. So you'd start out by clicking on Select Your Location. You get a drop-down menu. So you can look at sites that are in your farming area. And then once you've selected a site, you then can select a crop type. Here I've selected peas, and then a drop-down menu to select the type. So you can select yellow maple or green peas. So this then brings up all the different varieties that are in the hub that have been grown at that location. And you get a nice seed photo, and then you can click on, pick the ones that you want to do comparisons on. So there's a little box on each of these that you would click to get comparative data, and then you click on Compare Trials. So then you get something like this. So you're looking at a graph here where each colored line represents a different variety. You can see the different colors for the 3 different varieties in this case, and for each year, how they compared and at that particular location. And you can add in, as you can see, quite a few more different varieties to compare. This yellow line here is the temperature data. So you can see this is actually a measure of growing degree days. So you can see how they compared and how temperature for that year influenced yield. And then there's also precipitation data, which is the pink line at the bottom. And again, that gives you some comparison of conditions, how it affected comparative performance. And you can also select whether you want to see the data in bushels per acre, kilograms per hectare, or pounds per acre. So it gives you that option. If you scroll down the page, then you'll see a further breakdown of the data. These are the 3 varieties here that I selected. And then for each year, what was the percent of the check? And so it breaks out the data by year. And then here showing percent protein for the years where protein data was collected. And then also maturity data. And we show here both days to maturity, which recorded from the regional variety trials, as well as the maturity rating that you can see in the SASE guide. And then I just wanted to point out that in some cases we have 2 checks, so it'll break it out further by check. For example, in lentils, we moved from CDC Maxim as a check to CDC Nimble, but this still gives historical data against Maxim. Part of the reason is that some older varieties were never tested against Nimble. But the other thing this does is lets you see, for instance, CDC Maxim still occupies many acres, while you can look here, a quick look to see how it compares. And again, in different years and different locations. Another example here I have for chickpeas. CDC Lancer is the new check. It took over a couple of years ago from Amit. So again, we want to be able to compare to both varieties for historical reference and also just to see how it compares to varieties you might be a little more familiar with. Another option is you can go to trial locations and click on that. It'll then bring up a map and you can select your location. And in this case, I clicked on Swift Current. No, I don't have that. Anyway, once you select your site, it'll go through the same process that I just showed you, where you then select your crop and your crop type, and it'll bring up the data in a different way. And you can see there's different locations here that you can select. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and on behalf of myself and SPG for all the select seed growers that are in attendance, it's been a pleasure working with you and providing you varieties through our variety release program. But as you can see, there's lots of really good genetics now coming out of the various breeding programs, and I think there'll be exciting times for new varieties. All right. So if you have any questions for me, please enter them in Slido using the event code 3841641, and we will address them in the Q&A session. So next, we are pleased to be joined by Jaenet Schure with Limagrain to discuss breeding for disease resistance in peas and lentils. Jaenet was born and raised in the Netherlands. She completed her master's degree in plant breeding at Wageningen University and worked as a molecular project leader, assistant breeder for pulses in Limagrain Europe. In 2023, Jaenet transferred to the Canadian prairies as the new pulses breeder for Limagrain cereal seeds. So welcome, Jaenet.
Thank you, Laurie. Very excited to be sharing a little bit about our breeding program today and got some exciting updates for everybody. Oh, sorry. Can everybody see my presentation all right?
Yes, that looks great, Jaenet.
Oh, perfect. Then let's go. So I'm Jaenet, pulse breeder for Limagrain, and today we'll be talking about our quick refresh of our breeding objectives, our breeding tools, some key updates, and then some acknowledgements. So I always like to start with a little bit of refresh. Why are we breeding pulses in the prairies? And it's for the farmers, of course. So we're trying to align our main breeding objectives with that of farmers. We're always breeding for farmers, and I'm always happy to hear feedback. So if you don't agree with any of our objectives, please let us know, and we'll see where we can adjust. So for peas, our main focus is, of course, yield. We still want to have very high yielding variety, but a very close one next to it would be Aphanomyces resistance. As you can see in this picture here, you see the white healthy plants and then a brown discoloration. So that's how we can tell the susceptible plants apart from the healthy plants. Then we have Fusarium root rot resistance underneath that, where you can see more that blackening on the roots. And of course, we're always keeping in mind standability. The lodging does fall over, yes or no. It's pretty important to easily harvest the crop. And then we're looking at two quality characteristics, the seed coat breakage. I want to keep that germination high for the next generation of seeds to grow. And of course, bleaching in only green peas. We don't like to see when the green seeds turns more white, almost yellow. We always check it against limerick to make sure, as it's if it's significantly not different than limerick, then we know it's a good variety. And then for lentils, we've got another trait. We're always interested in looking into a new herbicide-tolerant alternative. It's pretty hard to manage weeds on the farm as is, so that is definitely something in our pipeline that we're working very hard on. But besides that, it's still important to keep your yield up as well. And then there's these two foliar diseases, Ascochyta, blight, and anthracnose. That's what we're looking into, making sure that we're not getting worse. And then Aphanomyces and Fusarium, the two major root rots. Next slide. So just wanted to quickly touch base on our whole breeding program and try to explain it with a lot of pictures and visuals. And I just decided to cut our program into 4 main components to show in one slide our whole breeding program and what are the tools we're actually using. So the tools that we're using in the early generation and line development are the greenhouse. We've got the crosses here, and you can see our little lentil crosses in the first picture. And then we'll do grow outs there. And then in the field, you can see in the last picture the pulled plants in bundles. These are the peas. So once we need to flip a plant a couple of generations, because if you cross a green and a yellow pea, the first generation will all be yellow. But then if you do that another generation, you'll see greens and yellows coming back. So that's why we need a couple of flips to get rid of that genetic variation. And the moment we pull one plant in the last picture, that's when we say this does not have any more variation. This is a pure line. This is going to the field for an observation plot next year. As you can see, that's when yield testing and seed increases are starting. So for yield testing, we got thousands of plots, ensuring that we hit similar flowering dates, similar maturity dates. We can make a lot of visual notes, but a big selection factor is still will be yield. And of course, if we see any disease in our fields, we'll make sure to take note of that. And then what is also on the sideline very important is starting seed increase. So we're already starting our seed increase a bit earlier when we're yield testing the last year before we're entering registration. Because if we start up seed increasing early, we can make sure we have a product for our seed partners to make sure we can handle breeder seed in the same year we're registering a variety. So there's no delays from the breeding program on our part to deliver a variety fast to farmers. That's very important to us to keep it, be as fast and efficient as possible in our whole breeding pipeline to ensure that it gets in the hands of farmers as soon as possible. And one of the methods that we're doing that is with a contour season. That's the last picture here. These are our wonderful colleagues from Limagrain in Chile. And as you can see, instead of having a seeder, they're actually seeding the seeds by hand here. Little different than how we're managing it. And honestly, this ensures really pure seed purity. So no mix-ups. That it's really a lot of work. So we're really happy to have them, and we use that contour season. We get one extra generation in a year to speed up our whole seeds increasing. Then we have a couple of screening platforms, and just wanted to highlight a couple. In the first picture, that's antenna or pathologist screening for aphanomyces. I think that's our number one screening priority right now. We're making a lot of exciting crosses, and I'll dive more into that later. And below here, you will see a jewel polisher, and Laurie already mentioned this. We got a protocol from Lindsay Wang, so we can test out for seed gut breakage. So all our later generation goes in this little machine and gives really nice data. And then in the last picture, you'll see our image analyzer. We're using the Vibe. There's many other methods that you can screen your seeds. And this image analyzer can do anything you visually can see on the seed and score it. In here, it's maybe a little hard to see, but you can see a gradient of white to green seeds to score bleaching. So it can score bleaching, can do TKW, flecking, anything you can imagine. It's one picture, which is a really great machine to have. So what do we do with all this different data? We're going to combine the phenotype. We're going to combine the genotype, the DNA. You can see some sampling here. And with all this data, all the screening, we can run some analysis and make the best selection to put forward in our program. Then, so overall, these are 4 main methods in our breeding pipeline that we're using. So next slide, I'm going to quickly touch base on something new this year and next year. This year in 2025, we started our own registration trials, and I think it's really exciting for Limagrain to be doing this because we got a lot of lines coming through our program, and we want to keep on testing a lot more. And I think that is, I'm really, really happy with that. And you can see our testing network in 2025. We ran already the lentil registration trials successfully in 2025. So you can see we got right here 7 locations in the lentil growing region. And one of the big advantages in the lentil MP pipeline is that we can accelerate lines with added value very easily throughout our whole pipeline. So we want to test more, and we want to accelerate lines in our pipeline. And we can accelerate those lines in our pipeline, can deliver these new varieties with new value to the farmers faster as well. And think, for instance, about when we're making crosses that with Aphanomyces partial resistance, we want to get that in the hands of farmers as soon as possible. So, and of course, having increased testing capacity, that helps a lot. And to be able to test in a wide geography is very important to ensure that it's a really good product we're delivering. So next year, 2026, we'll add P registration to our portfolio. We'll extend into Manitoba a little bit. So that's a little bit about our update on running registration trials. And then I want to dive into our pathology testing, and I'm really proud of where we are at now. We really built this whole pipeline with the help of SPG, with the help of GIFs and AFC, and it's pretty big. And as you can see in all these efforts, we really we only started in 2022, and now Antenna Visa and Delaney McAvoy are really helping build out all our pathology testing. So we noted in here, I'll quickly touch base on some registration requirements, disease testing, so the Fusarium root rot, mycosporal blight, powdery mildew, and then ascochyta blight and anthracnose. So we got those in the pocket. And then for Aphanomyces, we really are ramping it up. We have an external testing collaboration with GIFs funded by SPG, and we're sending thousands of lines with Aphanomyces backgrounds to test indoors. And you can see here, this is a picture of Delaney sampling some of those leaves at GIFs. And we can really test thousands of lines, and then we can pick, the best 100 to go in outdoor testing. Instead of doing just outdoor testing, we're already discarding over 90% just by testing it indoor, and it's susceptible, so why bother testing it in the field? So it's big. And then next year, we're going to do the same thing, keep feeding GIFs with new lines to test. And I've got some really great results that I'll show in a minute. And then the next step is, you can test about 100 lines with Aphanomyces background with Jaenet Chatterton, and we're planning to do that again in 2026. So hopefully we can give them some lines with higher value backgrounds to test with some exciting results. And again, I want to thank GIFS and AFC and SBG for all their support in making partial Aphthymisis resistant peas happening. So down quickly, slide on pathology testing. This is a test we ran indoors, done by Antenna. And as you can see in this slide, we're rating them from 0 to 5. If it's 0, it's resistant. If it's 1, it's moderately resistant. And if it's 5, it's very susceptible and the plant dies. And you can see here we tested about 500 lines, and we've got categories. And in the green, you can see these lines contain some partial resistant lines. We got some in the middle with maybe, less genes that with partial resistance. And then we have a bunch of susceptible, and everything right now on the market, like CDC Meadow, is a very clear 5. So we're very exciting to see those differences, and that is very obvious. And we're really hoping to be able to fast track some of this so we can register, hopefully, some of these AFI lines later this decade. Then one last key update is about our genomics department. Xiaoming Huang really helps with this part and pushing this forward. So quickly on genomic selection, it's like using a smart detective to pick the best plants for breeding, and you can make really great predictions as well in selecting the best parents and hoping that you're the best matchmaker between those lines. So genomic selection right now is already fully deployed in peas, but we want to push for that as well in Aphthymisis lines for predictive breeding. So if it contains some resistance, let's push that forward in our pipeline and make sure we can match the best high-yielding line with the best resistant line and have a great new variety that way. And next up, we hope that we can have our genomic selection ready for lentils in mid-2026. So that was my last slide. I just want to thank our team and SPG and AFC and GIFS for making this happen. And I think I'm over time, so you can see the names on here. Thank you for letting me present here.
Thank you so much, Jaenet. And if anyone has questions, please enter them in Slido using the event code 3841641, and we'll address them in the Q&A session. And I just want to say it's really exciting to see the work that's being done by Limagrain in this area, and we look forward to seeing resistant lines in the future. Our next presentation is a lentil breeding update from Dr. Anna Vargas. Dr. Vargas is an assistant professor and Agri-Food Innovation Fund Chair in Lentil and Faba bean at the University of Saskatchewan Crop Development Center. Her research focus is on advancing crop development and innovation in pulse crops. So welcome, Anna, and thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be here. Just to confirm, can you hear my voice and see my presentation?
Yes, everything looks great, Anna.
Okay, perfect. So I want to give an update on lentils, but I thought I should squeeze a few slides on faba bean, just because it's fun and it's part of the work that we are doing. So I want to start by kind of refreshing, and I think we're pretty well aware of what the priorities are in lentils in Western Canada, but our program keeps working on red and green lentils, both small and large, has the main activity. However, we do have a new line of breeding black seed-coated lentils. And we continue to work on main specialty classes, French greens, Spanish browns, and so on. Our main focus is on traits, and we do understand that right now is about some specific traits rather than just keep increasing yield. So we're highly working on herbicide tolerance and definitely trying to improve disease resistance, mainly root rot, but we're also keeping an eye on foliar diseases and trying to gain back some of that anthracnose resistance that we had previous to when we switched to IMI material mostly. And this year we were also funded for starting to study abiotic stressors. And what we really want to do here is basically deploy the bottom half of the crop. We do understand that there is a lot to explore in the root system, and I am going to give you a sneak peek of what we are already finding. But at the end of the day, we understand that working in the root system is not only related to the progress that we can do in root rot resistance, but it's also a matter of creating new varieties that are more stable across environments, which is much needed already. I am not going to go into details in each of the new varieties. I think Laurie gave us a really fantastic idea of that, but I want to kind of touch on some of the new CDC genetics. We do have CDC Albert coming in the next few years, which is named after our previous lentil breeder to honor him. I really want to emphasize some of the message that Laurie delivered, and is basically that we have much better genetics, and Maxim has really served us well. But we see a lot of value into moving introduce new varieties, and I think CDC Albert really represents a great opportunity for the future. We also do have a few small green lentil varieties. One of them is CDC Varilla, and the other is CDC Coda. Both already have commercializing partners. I am very excited about both. I think they do have, unfortunately, the data I am presenting here is compared to Invincible, but they do have great yield potential. And they also have thicker seed, which really represents an improvement if it goes to the hulling market. We do have new varieties also coming up from specialty classes. One of them is CDC Jupiter. We are in the works of commercializing partner, basically higher yield potential. And we will also have a new French green coming up, CDC Olive. As Laurie mentioned, I think we have this new very unique opportunity to start growing lentils that are black seed coated. And I just want to touch on some of the reasons why we think this is a good idea. As we think of retaining lentils in North American markets, there are opportunities that opens for processing, and black seed coat really protects better the cotyledon color. We do have a lot of evidence that supports this idea. We also know that it's better for dehulling. There are these pockets in between the cotyledon and the seed coat, so it should improve the hulling efficiency very, very significantly. We're starting to have some evidence also that it really helps tolerate diseases, especially in the root rot complex. So I think that should be very attractive. And I mean, for those cooking whole lentils, black lentils don't get mushy. So it's just really a really great opportunity. The first one is already in talks with a commercializing partner, and we do have another variety coming up for next year. I want to touch, I guess, on some of the research that we are doing both for root rot and herbicide tolerance. We do have a fantastic team working on root rot. Taylor DeJong, my master's student, and Dr. Chenani, who is no longer with us. He is now the prep reader in Agri-Food Canada. But thankfully, he established this great system for evaluating roots, and we will continue to work in collaboration really, really closely. We do have for root rot kind of two lines of work. We do have the work that we do in the field. We do have a root rot nursery that I was very privileged to start using 2 years ago, from work that Dr. Vanessa and Dr. Tom Warkentin have been establishing in the field. And we, in the space or in the field nursery, we really focus on having evaluations from scales, but also having very accurate quantitative data that really give us more precise phenotyping. But on that, we're also working on root systems. And the reason is because we do understand that there is a relation between the level of resistance to root rot diseases and the root architecture. So we've been building a lot of infrastructure to understand the root system better, mostly endorsed through rhizoboxes and 2D systems and imaging. And at the end, what we are expecting is to correlate both the resistance that we see in root rot with those root rot patterns and have a more stable source of resistance. And we're doing this through analyzing, I guess, the greatest diversity that this planet has to offer in lentils through studying a lentil diversity panel that we have put together. At this point, we do have a lentil diversity panel of cultivated lentil, but we are also building up a wild lentil diversity panel that I hope to be presenting about very, very soon. We're very excited about both. We're also studying historical lentil varieties developed by our program, because even though some of them are not good anymore agronomically, we do see value in what they have to offer in terms of resistance to diseases. And we're also already studying some populations that our program is developing for root rot specifically, that basically have specific combinations for resistance. So we started, I would say, from the very beginning, developing a scale that is specific for lentils, for studying above ground or biomass. We are doing this repeated in time so that we also gain an understanding on when is the best time to evaluate root rot. And the same goes to the root system. We develop a scale that goes from very healthy plants, usually that will have nodules due to their healthiness, to like pretty much dead plants that will be in the higher end of the scale. So what I am showing you here is basically a quantitative picture of what the level of resistance look like across our nursery. And each of those squares is basically a different lentil line, with the yellow ones representing those with the highest susceptibility and the blue ones with a little bit of higher resistance, and different levels of resistance. And it's really amazing that we are finding those levels of resistance across materials in our program, and also more diverse lentils. And they have a lot of value for what we can do to integrate this trait. This is a bit of a sneak peek of what we're finding in root systems. I am not exactly presenting data, but I guess the message that I want to deliver here is that what is in the bottom half has a lot of diversity that we are already exploring, and that will be tremendously valuable for root rot resistance and for other traits. It's really amazing. We have this idea that roots in lentils are just a shallow system with no much differences, but we're finding a lot of diversity that will be very important to continue dissecting. And here I am presenting a Manhattan plot. Like, we really don't need to go deep into the details of this plot, but I really want to put your attention on this peak here, which is basically showing us a region in the genome that is significant for root rot resistance. So this is basically an analysis across all the populations and a really high number of SNPs or genes, we can call it, And it's basically consistently showing us this really good significant peak. So the higher the peak, the more robust your analysis. And we went deeper into understanding what this region meant. And we basically found two different genes that are well known for giving resistance against diseases in plants. So what I want to say here is we have really good leads into understanding or dissecting the resistance to root rot. And this area actually represents 25% of the phenotypic variants that we observe in resistance, and we will continue to dissect the remaining 75 in the next coming years. In herbicide tolerance, I don't think I really need a slide to illustrate how bad some of the lentils fields can be, but I just thought I should do it. We do have a phenomenal team working on herbicide tolerance as well. And in this area, we are focusing on optimizing our phenotype. The reason being is because tolerance to the two groups that we are studying is extremely complex in terms of genetics. So optimizing our phenotyping will give us higher chances of finding resistance accurately. So we're putting a lot of focus into having UAV-based imaging with drones in the field. It's never the same to go one day do phenotyping compared to having almost daily images that can help us put the puzzle or a better puzzle together. And this is what we are getting now. And we are also generating an image-derived quantitative biomass reduction system. So she's not really
Anna?
into headshots. Yep.
Sorry, you just have 2 minutes remaining.
Okay, I'll do it fast. So my student is putting a system in which instead of having one value, we can have curves for studying resistance. So because I only have 2 minutes, long story short, we're finding very promising material for both herbicide groups. As you can see in the right, at a very high spraying rate. These aren't really great pictures, but we are also finding the same for metribuzin already, and we have some really good promising lines. On fava bean, bising and combising is definitely the way to go. I wanted to show you our latest fava bean variety that should be available next year. We're really catching up on yield despite having a small seed size. Dr. Ana Montenegro is going to start this journey of dissecting chocolate spot resistance. And I guess, to show you that we already have some breeding lines with very promising levels of resistance, and we will continue to stack that in our program. And with that, just to commit to the time frame, I really want to thank my both core breeding team and my group of researchers for the support in our program. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. Very informative presentation and lots of really in-depth work going on. So thank you for that. So if you have questions, please enter them in Slido using the event code 3841641, and we'll address them in the Q&A session. So up next, we are happy to have Dr. Tom Warkentin with a pea breeding update. Dr. Warkentin is a professor at the University of Saskatchewan's Crop Development Centre and holds the Ministry of Agriculture Strategic Research Program Chair in pulse crop breeding and genetics. His research focuses on developing superior field pea and soybean cultivars for Western Canadian environments. So welcome, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Laurie, for the kind introduction. You can hear me okay? You can see my slides?
Yes, it looks great, Tom.
Okay. So I'd like to start by acknowledging my co-authors, Schure, Kitema, and Tedesse. And briefly in this presentation, I'll talk about pea, a little bit on soybean, and then acknowledgements. So in terms of breeding objectives, My predecessor, Dr. Slinkard, would have said yield, yield, and yield. And you can see that high yield is still at the top of my list. Of course, disease resistance. We've heard already about root rots. And so, of course, Aphanomyces and Fusarium are the key. But we don't want to forget about the above ground foliar diseases, Mycosphaerella and powdery mildew. Of course, lodging resistance is critical. And then some big picture objectives related to heat, drought, and improving nitrogen fixation. He is already excellent at fixing N, but if we can boost it even further, why not? And although seed quality is listed at the bottom of my list, it's by no means a low priority. We're putting a lot of emphasis on boosting protein and having durable seed coats and many others. In this past year, CDC pea cultivars occupied 60% of the insured acres. These are data compiled by Canadian Grain Commission, which they obtained from the provincial crop insurance agencies. And economic analysis recently conducted shows 18 to 1. I think that's more than your RSP. So keep investing. Approach to plant breeding of pea. We use conventional plant breeding and add on any extra tricks we can find and utilize. Genomic approaches, markers, speed breeding. You can see there's a picture of the new speed breeding facility coming at the university. But up till now, we've done this work in the greenhouse. High throughput digital phenotyping, also known as using drones to take images. Winter nurseries or contra-season nurseries. We're using New Zealand these days for pea, and all kind of analytical techniques. Yeah, my voice is echoing. Can somebody help me with that?
Yes, Tom, we can hear the echo as well. I'm wondering if you were by chance logged on 2 devices. Is that possible? If not, I would encourage you to maybe just see if you have any other audio options when you look at your microphone.
Is this better?
That is
So
worse, actually.
Worse, okay.
If you're using a setup that's at all different from what we tested yesterday, maybe try what we tested yesterday because that sounded good.
Vote now.
Can you talk once more, Tom? I think that might be better. Oh, Tom, we might have lost you, but when you said, how about now, it sounded better to me. Tom, do we have you? Tom, feel free to try speaking again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Tom, everything's better. There's no echo and your camera's on now, so I think you're good to resume.
Hey, Laurie, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're coming through very well, Tom.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Let me continue then. Sorry about that, folks. I'll move along. I wasted some of my time. Pea cultivars. Briefly, I want to share about this. Again, a summary of the data that from the Grain Commission. You can see on the left side yellow pea, on the right side green pea. You can see the various varieties, the top grown varieties. If they have CDC in front of the name, they're from Crop Development Center. If it says AAC, it's from Ag Canada. Laurie did a very nice summary of this, so I won't spend too much time on it. I wanted to zoom in on a few of the top performers in terms of yield. You can see them there. Basically, I've indicated the years of testing, the yield in the south of Saskatchewan, the yield in the north, and then the average for yellows and greens. And then in terms of some of the other traits, protein, lodging, mycosphaerella, and seed coat breakage, if I put something in yellow, it means that it's doing better than the check. The check is CDC Amarillo at the bottom of both of these charts. So you can see some positives for those traits. With respect to the greens, you see Husky is actually quite a bit higher yielding than even the second place variety. To zoom in on three recent releases from our program, CDC Boundless, Engage, and Canuck all have good yield in the south and the north in comparison to Amarillo. Boundless was released by, or is represented by CCAN, Engage by Alliance, and Canuck also by CCAN. And to point out that a certified seed of CDC Boundless is available for this spring, so you can check that one out. Root rot, Anna also talked about root rot. We share a root rot nursery at the university. This is what it looks like up close with drip irrigation. We do a 2-year rotation with fill on half of it and plots on the other half. The pea plots were excavated the day before this picture was taken, so you can see that they look a bit different than the lentil plots that hadn't been excavated yet. The pea plots, they're excavated by hand by digging with a spade, and the roots are washed and scored for disease. We want to accelerate the release of varieties with improved root rot resistance. Basically, we do that by crossing lines that we've developed that have moderate resistance with high-yielding varieties like Canuck or Engage or Boundless, for example, Tollefson. For example, we made 85 combinations like this in 2025. And then we're using marker-assisted selection for these key what we call QTLs associated with improved resistance to Aphanomyces. These are advanced in the program into yield trialing. This year we included some of the second year pre-co-op yield trials in our root rot nursery, and you can see in this histogram that the mean of the checks is here, but all of the ones on the left-hand side of this graph had lower disease score than the average of the checks, and these are lines with good agronomic performance as well. So we plan to enter the best of these into the co-op test this season. We conducted a study to look at how are the current varieties doing in terms of root rot, so that farmers can make informed choices with varieties that are available right now. So we tested 55 over 2 years, 2024 and 25, at Lethbridge, Morden, and Saskatoon. We had moderately high disease pressure at all, so that's a good thing. And we saw some moderate differences among the cultivars. Here's a busy slide to show the results. The top part are the 55 varieties tested in 2024, and the bottom graph are the 55 varieties tested in 25 over those locations. To zoom in on a snapshot of the results, the ones on the left-hand side had the lower disease scores. These are the two moderately resistant donor checks, and these lines here had moderate resistance. They didn't differ much from these resistance sources. You can see by the color of the bars, the purple ones are the purple flower ones, but there are also several white flower ones here in this class. And in comparison, at the other end of the scale were these varieties that had what we would, I think I would rate them as moderately susceptible, and I'd rate these as intermediate. But we'll have discussions with the pathologists, the agronomists, the breeders in the coming year, and the goal is to update the info in the seed guides. We're using various other strategies, genomic type strategies, and I acknowledge all the funders of those projects here, basically to look for improved parents for crossing, to look for improved markers, and perhaps directly using a mutagenesis approach to select lines with improved either root rot resistance or higher protein or higher yield. Very briefly on soybean, we're trying to improve soybean for the northern frontier. We're collaborating with many organizations in this process. Here's a picture of Ketema Daba, one of the authors of this talk, and he's leading the day-to-day efforts on soybean. We're trying to breed for the early maturity region of Western Canada, high yield, earliness in maturity groups 00 and 000, cold tolerance, pod clearance, high seed protein. We're working in a non-GMO platform, and we're looking for larger seed size. We have a lot of diversity for maturity. At first, we thought that was our biggest problem, but I think we've got that under control. We released our first variety a year ago, CDC Cedar. These are data that Laurie compiled from the regional trials this past year, and in that trial, you can see that the yield was 11% above the Czech OAC prudence while being 5 days earlier to maturity. Cedar is also being marketed by CCAN. We're also using a winter nursery in the case of soybean. We're using a nursery in Costa Rica. You could call it speed breeding because they can give us 2 generations in 1 winter. And we're also using, in a collaboration with colleagues at University Laval and others in Canada, public and private soybean breeders, using some genomic prediction tools to make the best crosses. Because you can imagine a plant breeder could make any huge number of options of crosses to make. Which are the best ones to make? So we're using a customized program called Soy Galaxy to help us to predict the best combinations, for example, for what we would call 000 maturity or 00 maturity. And so by doing that, if we did a retrospective look on that approach, we find that this program has been effective because it's predicting the best crosses predicted by that program produce quite a few lines that actually make it into our advanced trials, while the bottom predicted ones only produce a few that would make it that far. So we think this is a promising genomic selection approach. I'll wrap up with that and acknowledge many colleagues that I have the privilege of working with at the university, in Canada and beyond. And definitely thanks to SAS Pulse growers, the Ministry of Agriculture, Alberta Pulse, Manitoba Pulse, CCAN, ARDAR, the Genome Centers, and the university for their support. I think I'll wrap up there, Laurie. Sorry for that problem with my mic.
No worries, Tom. We thank you so much for your presentation. It's great to see, again, some really strong varieties coming out of your program and some new traits in development. If you have questions for Tom, please enter them in Slido using event code 3841641, and we'll address them in the Q&A session. So our next presentation is a chickpea breeding update from Dr. Bunyamin Taran. Dr. Taran is a professor at the University of Saskatchewan's Crop Development Center and holds the Ministry of Agriculture Strategic Research Program Chair in chickpea and flax breeding and genetics. His research focuses on developing superior chickpea and flax cultivars for Western Canadian environments. So welcome, Bunyamin.
Thank you, Laurie, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody, and thanks to SPG for inviting me to give an update on the chickpea varieties. Can you hear me well?
Yes, Bunyamin, everything looks and sounds great to us.
Okay, thank you. So here we go. So I'm a chickpea and flax breeder at the Crop Development Center. So let's start. So what happened with chickpea? So this is one of the reasons why we grow chickpea here in Saskatchewan in Western Canada. So again, this is one of the legume crop. It's a fixed nitrogen, so it's reducing the need for nitrogen fertilizer and improve soil structure, increase the biomass, and chickpea is best suited to brown and dark brown soil zones. So keep that in mind. I know that some people are excited to grow chickpeas, so you have to look into the zone where the crop insurance can cover you. And it is perform well under moderate rainfall, and chickpeas really prefer the well-drained soil. So if you are on the heavy gumbo soil, just watch out. And then it fits well with the cereal-based rotation, so especially the 4-year rotations. So to cut off between your 2 cereals and oilseed, so you can insert it chickpeas as well as other pulses that fit in your regions or your areas. It is in some cases, chickpeas also deter many insects due to the acids on the leaves and the aerial part of the plants and on the pods. And also, one other reason that chickpea is getting popular is because it has better tolerance to Aphanomyces root rot. There are the root rot complex that may affect chickpeas, but at least for Aphanomyces, chickpeas give you the option. Okay, so having said that, there are still challenges for growing chickpeas, and we all know about this. Number one is Ascochyta disease pressure. So this is the classical global problem. Any chickpeas growing areas, they may have Ascochyta. So this disease, especially intensified under wet, cool, and humid conditions, which sometimes happen here in Saskatchewan. And the second one is maturity. So keep in mind, chickpeas still having strong indeterminate growth habit. Okay, it may delay in maturity. And if there is a lack of killing frost or excess moisture, cool temperature, so some of you may experience this in 2025, where we had in some location excess moisture. Even our own trial at El Rose is right off because of too much moisture, and the end of October still green. So probably we should have brought a baler instead of combined to the location. So that's the reality with chickpeas. So as I said again, it's better to the drier part of the province, which is on the brown southwest corner of the province. Okay, this is where we are now in terms of the acreage and yield average as a pound per acre and total production from 2022 to 2025. So in the last 4 years, the acreage of chickpea more than doubled. So from 235,000 acres in 2022, now we are over 500,000, so 540,000 acres in Western Canada. And also the yield is increasing. So in the past few years, we really hit with the drought, very dry conditions. So you can see now it's back to kind of about normal. If you look at the long-term yield, probably it's around 16 to 1800 bushel per acre. So with that, now we are close to 500,000. But because of the conditions in 2025, we had majority second-grade product, which is mostly going into animal feed market or dog food markets and you name it. So that's the reality, but we continue to produce this crop. Okay, this is where the chickpea are grown in the province. So used mostly is, as I said, is fit well in the brown and dark brown soil zone. So you can see the concentration of chickpeas growing area in the province. It's in the south central Saskatchewan to southwest. So that's where we are now. And when you grow chickpeas, you really need to see into the chickpea zones. Okay, this is from Crop Insurance. So you can see on their website which area is covered. So there is a zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. Okay, if you are outside this zone here, so you're better off growing other pulses instead of chickpeas. We have faba bean, we have peas, we have lentil, we have dry bean. Okay, so again, chickpea not for everybody. Okay, so if you need to be beside in the growing areas that is recommended, but you also need to be really diligent when you grow chickpeas. It's not the crop that you can seed it and then you go to the lake and taking holidays. Okay, so the majority of chickpea grown in Saskatchewan are the Kabuli type. Okay, so you can see this is the average. This is the data from the Saskatchewan crop profile, which they cited the data from Statistics Canada. Okay, the majority are the Kabuli, and if you see the average yield, actually the Kabuli will, after getting up into the program, so now it's a higher yielding than the Desi type. In the past, we always assumed that the Desi type will go higher than the Kabuli, but now it's going to start flipping. So you can see that on average, overall chickpea production in Saskatchewan. Okay, so this is what we have chickpea grown in Saskatchewan in 2024. 2025 is very similar. Okay, the largest production is on Leader. So Leader is already try to remember, like we released in 2010, so 16 goes to 16 years. Okay, so this is the very popular. Okay, so still the largest acres in 2024 and 2025, still CDC Leader, but the newer one, for example, CDC Orkney, Pasqua, Pearl, and Lancer are going up in the acres. So I hope that in the next few years, more and more the newer varieties, which is you get a yield advantage, will be grown in larger acreage in the province or in Western Canada. And this is what we do in our breeding program for the chickpeas. Okay, so we look into the yield. Of course, one of the major selection criteria is the yield and yield stability. So usually when we release a new variety of chickpeas, we look overall 20 to 30 year station year data, meaning around like 2 or 3 years, about 5 to 6 locations, up to like 7 locations per year before we release any variety. So we know that the newer variety that we release, we have the yield in there and the stability across location as well. And then we continue to make selection for disease resistance, so ascochyta. Now we look as well any symptom of wilt or root rot. Usually we make a selection right away. Okay, so although we do not know what causing it, but when we saw the symptom in our plot or in our nursery, then we write off right away the respected line. And we work on the herbicide tolerance. So beside most of the imidazolino tolerance, okay, all the newer varieties have the resistance to IMI. So it's not clear field as in lentil. So it's a common. So we try to expand the scope of the herbicide tolerance to looking at into different mode of actions. So we look into group 5, for example, group 6 and group 14. Okay, so we now, this is part of the cluster project funded by SPG and the federal government. So we continue screening into that. We see some promising. So we're now going into the second round of screening, make sure that we didn't get the escape. Okay, so that's what we do. So we do just on a conventional, it's not a GM or it's not gene editing. So we go into germplasm collections. And at one population, we just did mutation genetics. So we did mutation populations and we screen them. So there's some promising lines there. Okay. And we work on the abiotic stress tolerance, especially the heat tolerance is ongoing. So we have candidates. Now we start making the crosses with those abiotic stress tolerant or heat tolerance, where you can see the plants can withstand up to 35 to 40 degrees Celsius with limiting reduction in yield. Okay, so we work on that. So one of the students working on that project, as well as working on the tolerance to low phosphorus content in the soil. So we work on that project as well. And we continue working on the seed quality, so the appearance, processing, and nutritional. So when you deal with a whole seed food crop like this, the first appearance, the first what you see, that's really important. So we need to go into that. So seed size in chickpea is really important. Okay, the larger the seeds, you get the premium, and the shape as well, and the color. We continue looking into the processing. So in-house, before we release any Kabuli varieties, we did the canning testing. So we know how the quality of the product, the Kabuli that we have, by looking at into the brine color, seed changes after processing, is there any breakage of the seeds. Okay, so we use in-house technique, and we use a glass jar instead of a tin can. Because if you look at the market in Europe, most of the canned product, especially pulses like chickpeas, they use a glass jar instead of tin can. So the consumer can see directly the quality of the product. Okay, so we look into that. And we also do the milling efficiency, especially for the daisy type. So we are aiming around 80% milling efficiency, meaning after you remove the seed coat and you ground into flour, so how much you get compared to the original weight. So that's what we are aiming. And we look at into the nutritional quality, especially the protein and oil content. So in chickpeas, protein is really important, one of the major source of protein for consumer. So right now it's around 20 to 22% protein. So we are aiming around 24% protein. And oil is the two types of chickpeas that we are working is completely different opposite. So in the Kabuli type, the consumer like to have higher oil content. So right now it's range from 4 to 8%. Okay, so they like to have higher oil content because it's make the product, for example, for making hummus, become like a creamy and tasty. Whereas in the daisy type, they like to have lower oil content, so below 2%. So that's really lower oil content that the consumer wants, because in daisy type, they're processed by dehull and milled into flour. So they like to have low oil content so that it's extended, as well as more conducive in processing in the milling process. So that's on
Bunyamin,
quality. So that's the, yes?
you have only a couple minutes left.
Sure, yeah, thank you. This is what we have in the seed guide. So you look into the seed guide. Okay, so it's getting slimmer now. So we remove from some older varieties, so Lancer, Clanix. So again, look at into the seed guide here, and then look at into where is your areas, area 1 or area 2. Okay, so you can see that so far from the overall trials that we have, CDC Orkney is one of the highest yielding. So we still have a leader in there, so you can see the difference between Orkney and leader. Look at into the Ascokaita black. Okay, so that's another consideration for your areas. If you are into the specialty chickpea, you can look into black daisy or sunset. So there's an option there. Okay, down the road, this is what we have. So this is from the 2025 regional trial. So we have a couple lines that is stand out and higher yielding than Lancer, which is our check. And also we have lines, for example, if you look at the bottom of the table here, a few lines that will be replacement for Pasqua. So you see 3789 released this year with larger seeds and higher yield, slightly higher yielding than Pasqua, and then number 14 there, 3764, even bigger seeds and good for Ascokaita and also better yield. So that's a couple years. So maybe in another year we will see in 2026 if this line maintain the capacity, the performance, then we'll be really sitting in early 2027. Okay, the top one there is a kind of medium size, very high yielding across all locations. So that's another option that will be released to growers. So having said that, so the pipeline is really full, and we continue to deliver the product for the Saskatchewan, Western Canada farmers. So with that, I'd like to thank the support from government, from the government of Saskatchewan, the pulse growers, and the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, the Cluster Project, WGRF, and the university. So thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer any question if you have.
Thank you so much, Bunyamin. I know I was excited when I saw the data coming out of the regional variety trials of some of the new lines you have up and coming. It's great to see those improvements. So if you have questions for Bunyamin, please enter them in Slido using event code 3841641, and we'll address them in the Q&A session. So finally, we are joined by Laird Lampertz, who leads the sales and agronomy team at Pitura Seeds, which is a family-owned seed producer, genetic distributor, and food-grade processor serving Western Canada. With over a decade of experience in the pulse and soybean sector, he brings extensive market insight to help growers and breeders align variety choices with evolving industry demands. So Laird is here to talk about herbicide-tolerant soybean varieties. Welcome, Laird.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's unique and awkward to be sitting in a hotel room at Brandon Egg Days that's going on below you, and you're taking in and learning what's happening with your neighbors. So looking forward to sharing some of my insights into what's going on in the herbicide-tolerant soybean world, where Manitoba is at and where Saskatchewan very well might be going. So, and maybe just to connect a little bit with viewers, I'll share a little bit. I was born and raised on a grain farm in Southwest Manitoba, specifically about 20 miles from Redvers. So I've had lots of crossover with the Saskatchewan groups and hung out way too much as a younger adult in Southeast Saskatchewan doing agronomy out there for a while. So in the last 10 years, it's brought me to Pitura Seeds, where I've been a part of a family-owned seed farm that specializes in lots of different crops, but specifically a lot of pulses. And over the years, so we've kind of evolved from a traditional farm. We farm about 4,000 acres of all high pedigree seed of almost all crop types. We have 2 seed cleaning facilities that clean seed and package seed, as well for the food industry. And so kind of touching right from the breeder level to the end user. And as of recently, we are going to be growing our 26th crop of soybeans starting next year. And we've entered into the world of not only growing soybean seed, cleaning soybean seed, retailing, selling soybean seed, but also distributing soybean seed across Western Canada. And so I'll share a little bit about that, where the market is today, where the market or the industry thinks the opportunity is in Saskatchewan. So here's some of the core values just at the bottom. I always love to share it. It's something we're extremely proud of at Pitura Seeds. Those core values at the bottom is really what we try to emulate in all things that we do. So why is there interest in soybeans again in Saskatchewan? Well, I think first we should also speak to why is Saskatchewan asking someone from Manitoba to speak about soybeans? Well, it is because of the consistency that soybeans have become in Manitoba. We all know the story that took place in Saskatchewan starting 10, 12 years ago. Acres were nothing, all the way up to 1 million or 850,000, projected to be at 1 million, 1.5 as things continued. And then the traditional rainfall patterns of Saskatchewan caught up to themselves in kind of the years 17, 18, 19. And we slowly started to see that decrease of soybean acres, almost to a rapid point. And, it's interesting to think about as we were a part of that soybean growth model and everyone was excited about Saskatchewan getting on board because Saskatchewan does things in big ways. I was having breakfast this morning, a great example with one of the directors of the Manitoba Pulse Growers. And I was telling him I was, giving this presentation in a couple hours. And he said, why are you doing that? Don't tell them that. Because if Saskatchewan gets on board, they do everything bigger and better than Manitoba, and that's going to hurt our marketplace. And so I got a kick out of that. It was also a director of a Manitoba pulse grower that wanted to give Saskatchewan a hard time. So, regardless of what happened and what's transpired, what I want to talk about today a little bit is where is it going to go in the future, and how is it going to be a fit, and when it's going to be a fit. And through our distribution of NK soybeans for Western Canada, we've got a lot of calls this fall. And a lot of the feedback we've heard as to why there's more interest is because simply, there's more early season genetics out there than there was in 2017 and 2019. There, is improved genetics in terms of disease resistance, and there's a lot more awareness on what diseases are an issue and aren't an issue. Probably the second most popular reason is growers are looking for a way to extend their rotation. So some of their other high value pulse crops can be great again. Yeah, if I can say that out loud. And the fifth is profitability. Farmers are getting pinched and pushed and pulled in different directions, and they're really searching for that silver bullet. So maybe for some areas in Saskatchewan, this is gonna be the silver bullet moving forward. So I'll maybe touch on those 4 points quickly in the next 10 minutes to highlight, what's different than when the bubble burst in 2017 to 2019, and if we're going to see that renewed bubble start to take off. So quickly, at a high level, when you think about what's different from then till now, it's simply the number of varieties that are out and available to be grown in different regions and different pockets of Saskatchewan based on heat unit accumulation. In the earlier days, 10 years ago, every company had maybe one or maybe two varieties that were a fit for those geographies, whereas we're seeing most companies have 3 or 4 out. And looking below, there's a great example of NK soybeans. Those are 3 varieties that all bring a very unique benefit depending on the field, depending on the region, depending on the soil type, that is going to be important. And I think this might be key to why soybeans can last, is more options, more genetics, understanding the genetics better rather than just getting anything out there is going to produce better results on a field basis. You're not going to see one variety broad sweeping across all of Saskatchewan's geography taking over, because there's such a range in outcomes of handling drought, handling moisture, handling IDC, handling root rots. So there's still lots to learn, but I think because there's more varieties, there's going to be more options for growers to make sure they're picking the right variety for the right field. And I won't dig into this. Here's an example of just the varieties that are being tested, annually in the Saskatchewan growers trials. And there's more than this. Every company has 2 to 3 varieties out there that is on top of these varieties that are commercialized, ready to go. So there's more information out there than you think. It's just a matter of engaging that conversation. So keep on going, because the other thing that is extremely different when it comes to not only the number of varieties from 2017 is the herbicide trait systems. And this is one of the reasons why soybeans are going to see farmers are going to see an additional benefit. And that is simply weed control. Primarily, it was only Roundup Ready out in the first bubble. And the first influx of soybeans. And now there's a whole host of options. Primarily, dicamba, Roundup Ready Extend soybeans have the largest % of market share in Western Canada. And that is going to continue to be that way because it is a powerful tool. If you want to clean up a field, if you want to fix a problem field, dicamba will do it with that residual control of weeds that have glyphosate tolerance. And so we all know in our pulses, we rely on group 2s way too much. This is a fix for that. I'm extremely optimistic about dicamba being a solution for a lot of growers, but I want to put a caveat on it. Please be cautious with it. It's already under the microscope of regulation bodies, and it does move off site and it does cause issues, but if used correctly, it is okay and it'll be fine. So just please follow those regulations. There's a reason why they're in place, so that we can keep this tool in our toolbox, because it's going to be a handy tool as we evolve into the next set of herbicide tolerant soybeans. Extend Flex. We're starting to see more Extend Flex varieties come out. There's not as many Extend Flex varieties available in early season Saskatchewan varieties, but it's got the additional active ingredient as glufosinate, which, is a unique problem. It's a good contact herbicide with a good fix without high resistance issues. Have to think about how we manage those residual or volunteer soybeans in following crops. But the good part is volunteer soybeans are very uncompetitive. So Extend Flex are out there today. The third option that's out there today is Enlist soybeans, and that's 2,4-D plus glufosinate herbicide resistant. A great option for some other weeds as well, like Palmer amaranth, as it creeps north and creeps west to manage and clean up fields. And then obviously the future of what's coming, it's not out yet. It's still pending regulation with end-use buyers, and that is HD4, or the trade name from Bayer is Viconic, which has all of those combined, all four herbicide chemistry. So 2,4-D, dicamba, glufosinate, and glyphosate. So there's lots of evolution in the trait systems, but ultimately it's the trait system that is going to be a big benefit to growers in those southeast regions or central Saskatchewan regions that are dealing with the ever-growing challenge of kochia. So those are varieties, traits. Those are reasons that are going to make a difference in the next wave of soybeans. Now I wanted to dive into a little bit about genetics and what's coming. This is a ways off, but it's interesting to think about this trait that was identified. And this article is in, I believe, Seed World, the latest publication of Seed World. And it's interesting because this individual's name is Ron Mittler from the University of Missouri. And he found a biological mechanism that helps soybeans deal with traits. And that's essentially when that soybean plant is under stress and drought conditions, it closes its stomata on the leaf surface and begins using stomatas on the reproductive bodies of the plant. So the buds, the flowers, and the pod, the stomatas open and close on that, respire water, help keep that reproductive tissue as healthy as possible. And so it'll be interesting to see traits like this, if they can be isolated and moved into new future soybean varieties and or maybe even other crops, how this kind of technology might become an advantage to that soybean acre, increasing even more. So that's, a ways out there on what soybeans.
Laird, you have 1 minute remaining.
Maybe. Okay, 1 minute. Very good. Root rots. We've heard it talked about root rots. The good news is within Saskatchewan, root rots and soybeans is very limited. And so there is not a lot of crossover within your existing pulses with the diseases in your other pulses that are causing big issues in soybeans. Aphanomyces, verticillium wilt, clubroot, ascochyta, the list goes on. And finally, my last point that I think is so important is, what is the value that soybeans can bring other rotations? I talked to growers in northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan that have put soybeans in their rotation. They're extending their canola, they're extending their pea rotation, and it is huge net benefits of 3, 5, 7 bushels an acre to managing that disease rotation or that weed rotation. So something really, really important to think about. And on top of that, we learned a lot when soybeans was in Saskatchewan. Since then, we can plant earlier if conditions are right. Even if it's May 15th, you can plant soybeans if temperatures are there and moistures are there, and therefore being able to extend your maturity of soybeans. And then finally, the point that resonates with farmers, producers, industry people, soybeans are easy, like extremely easy. Don't forget how easy they are. your wife, your kids, your family, they're going to appreciate the family time that soybeans can bring to you. You know, I say it kind of sounding like a joke, but it's the truth. When you really think about what it can do to your farm rotation, your equipment rotation, so on and so forth. So again, summarizing these 4 or 5 main points: more genetic germplasm pools to pull from that is going to continue to benefit farmers in the future, more trait platforms, more acres. There's going to be more intentional breeding. We only have more varieties because there was a boom in 2017 and 2018. And so if there's more interest, the industry is going to pay attention, and it's going to be a net win for Saskatchewan growers in the future. And start small, pick the right variety, the right field, build confidence, and figure how it's going to work in your rotation. And hopefully you'll be a happy camper. So here's my contact information. I love debates. I love questions. Reach out to me at any time. I appreciate the invitation and look forward to more conversations.
Thank you so much, Laird. We were really happy that you could join us today. Certainly a lot of good information for growers. And I know this year we saw some really high yields in our soybean trial, so hopefully there is a bright future in Saskatchewan. We are now going to move into some live Q&A with our presenter panel. So a reminder to our panelists, please turn on your cameras now. And for attendees, it is too late to submit your questions, so please enter them in Slido's Q&A tab using event code 3841641. And as we wait for questions, I would like to thank everyone once again for the great talks on the varieties of pulses and soybeans. It was, I think it was a very productive session, so thanks again. So we do have a number of questions here. So the first one is on lentils. With the black seed-coated lentils, do they fall under their own market class? And is there any concern about the black seed coat entering the red market?
I assume that's for me.
Senna?
How I see it is that if they go to the whole market, they should just fit under their respective market class. Let's say small red lentils, or I guess it's going to be more complicated with green ones. But this is something that I think we will definitely need to discuss as a committee at PGDC and other meetings. And what was the second part of the question? Is there any concern about what?
About the black seed coated lentils entering the red lentil market.
I guess the one concern that somebody raised was that when there are any holes remaining in the whole lentil seeds, if those are black, it will be a higher penalty. But I will say that's a matter of figuring out how to remove those easier. It's kind of a process in, I guess, just optimizing that. I don't think there are any concerns really.
Oh, thanks, Anna. Also in the lentil section, you talked about breeding with increased tolerance to group 14s. Is this tolerance to pre-emerge residual applications or post-emergence in crop?
Great questions. So group 14 is definitely pre-emergence. That should be 72 hours before emergency or so. That is that period between seeding and emergence. And then, well, metribuzin will be post-emergence, right? When we have the turnout.
Thank you, Anna. What specific active ingredients are being screened for in chickpeas and lentils? So maybe start with chickpeas first. If Bunyamin, you wanted to comment?
Sure. So yes, we are good at killing chickpeas. So this is how we screen for herbicides. So what we did is that now we screen all the germplasm collection available, and we also created mutagenized population. We screen for number 1, metribuzin. So metribuzin or Semcor. I know some of you use already in chickpeas and you see the damage. So my advice to you for the current varieties, Once you apply Sencor, you go to the lake for a couple of weeks, so you don't see all the damage. The plants will recover, okay? As long as, and then the window of application is very narrow, so you have to apply early. So we screen the newer collection that we do, the population that we have, and there's some promising lines there. So what we did, we now collected the seeds from those potential tolerance, and we continue screening. Number two, we're also looking into group 2, but different kind of chemical. We look at the sulfonyl urea. So is there any possible mutation within the collection that we have that may be able to withstand sulfonyl urea? That's number 2. And then we're also looking into bentazone or Limagrain chemicals. We screen that as well. And then also we look into group 14 for Axor, the chemical. And all of this we apply on the plant. So we intentionally screen on a bigger plant. So if we see less damage, then we'll be happy with that. So I don't know, Anna, you want to go on the lentil before I continue with the next question?
Of course. Thank you for asking. So in lentils for pre-emergence, in group 14, we're working with sulfonylureacil has the active ingredient. In group 5, we're working with metribuzin. And I should have probably mentioned before, we do this being aware that there are already coach populations resistance to group 14. It's just the reality, right? But we are also aware of that.
Thank you, Anna. Jaenet, did you have anything to add on the screening of lentils, herbicide types?
No, I think Anna covered it really well.
Good.
As it comes to black lentils, I know there is some concerns with growers about mixture and acceptance of distributors later on in the pipeline. So, but if it's going to a dehelling market, you don't see the seed code anymore. So maybe it's worth some conversations across the whole pipeline.
Great, thank you for that. So another question here on chickpeas. Are there any promising chickpea varieties with determinate type of growth?
Okay, very good questions. Yeah, so yeah, chickpea is well known for indeterminate, and there is actually germplasm that is more determinate, very early flowering. So we tested that, we make the cross, but you keep in mind, indeterminate is not all bad. So we like to have this kind of semi-indeterminate. So plant is responding well with the environment when it is a bit indeterminate. So when there is stress, so plant will stop, and then when there is more conducive environment, it will grow back. So with determinate, complete determinacy in chickpea, what we say is that plants flower really early. It's not responding to the day length as in many other genotypes. But again, there's not enough biomass to support the yield production. So then the yield really got hit with the complete determinate early flowering, early maturing variety. So we're now trying to understand what control it, and we just got a new project funded by SPG, WGRF, and provincial government. So we have we identified the early flowering genes that kind of make the plants not responding to the day lengths, and we have near isogenic lines. So we'll be testing them in the unconditional, non-traditional chickpea growing area. So maybe in the Roster, Melfort, that's what we're going to grow chickpea of those in that project. Okay, so that's what we are at now with the determinacy growing in chickpeas.
Another one on chickpeas. Oh, sorry.
There's another one on chickpeas.
Yeah, so asking about micronutrients. What micronutrients are being selected for in chickpeas, and how much variation are you finding, and is it a promising area for improvement?
So we saw some variation. We look specifically, we're not doing any selection, but rather than evaluating what we have in the breeding lines. So we look at iron and zinc, so those two major ones. And we look at differently. For example, one of my students, few years back, can we increase the amount of micronutrients, iron and zinc in the seed by fertilizer, for example? So some are responding, so there's an increase in there. So they're kind of through agronomic biofortifications. And within the chickpea itself, there are variation with the iron accumulation in the seed. So we have that data. So it really depending on the marker. Is the marker will be willing to pay a premium with the higher iron because this is expensive to do the selection? We have to use ICP-MS to make an analysis. So we'll do, but at this time, it's not part of the major selection criteria. There are variability, of course, that we can breed into. Okay, so what we know right now on the release variety that we have, so we have in-house data, how much we have iron. We even have tested the bioavailable, the one that can be absorbed by human body from the iron available in the seeds.
Thank you, Bunyamin. Question on peas. So what determines the percent splitting loss during processing for split peas? Is this a breeding target?
Would you like me to jump in?
Yes, please.
I suppose splitting loss would be the weight of the seed coats. And I would say it's actually not really a breeding target from my point of view. Peas basically all split quite well, and there's not that much variation in seed coat thickness. So the seed coat is about 10% of the weight of the seed. For me, I don't know that I would try to make it 9% or something. I don't know that it's worthwhile. Maybe Jaenet wants to comment as well.
It's not a breeding target for us either.
Thank you. Here's a question on soybeans. So what is the economic potential for growing soybeans in Saskatchewan versus peas or lentils? Laird, can you comment on that one?
Great question, and it's the reason why there's more questions about it this year. When nitrogen is your biggest cost, these growers are evaluating that. At the end of the day, on soybeans, I'll speak to, depending on the variety, but you're $140 to $180 an acre all in with seed and your starter rates of fertilizer. So I would say it's going to be a little bit more than peas up front on average. But as you move forward, your odds of spraying a fungicide are not going to happen on soybeans. Your herbicide options are going to be cheaper. And so that's where it kind of makes up the difference.
Great, thank you. Is there any work being done on excess moisture tolerance in lentils? And not sure who wants to jump in on that one first. Rihanna?
I would say not directly has a main priority at this point. However, I guess in our line of abiotic stressors, this is exactly what we want to have more control of, is just, I guess, creating varieties that can really overcome these long periods of drought or excess moisture. So I would say not directly has one trait, but definitely in the sense of like understanding more stability across like very variable environments, and has a longer term, I would say, a strategy, at least in our end.
That's great, thank you. Jaenet, did you have any comments on that, or?
I think we both have a very similar breeding practice where we're testing in multiple locations. And like last year, Saskatoon was very high moisture, so then you're automatically selecting for those lines that have a bit better resistance that way, but not directly right now.
Right. And what would you recommend to growers to prevent breakdown of Phanomyces resistance once resistant varieties are available?
Yeah, good question. So right now we are working with SPGN already thinking about some stewardship. How do we communicate this to growers? So I would not say I've got one definite finite answer. I do know that our pea lines are partial Aphanomyces resistance. So growing them on a highly infected field is probably not the best idea and will not give you those results that you're looking for. But if there's moderate levels, maybe that is the better way to go. And then there's definitely other alternatives we're seeing in different crops, like in wheat, where they've got, for instance, a 10% escape crop in the field. So the disease targets those plants first. So there's definitely a couple of methods we could use to mitigate that risk. Not sure if you have anything to add, Tom, to this.
Yeah, those are good comments. The only other thing I would add is that when we're breeding, we like to try to incorporate multiple genes for partial resistance, sort of a stacking approach, so that it should improve the durability of resistance.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now for Tom, a CDC Husky is a game changer for green peas. Do you see lines that are in your pipeline that can bring further improvement, or will this one just be so hard to beat?
Yeah, good question. Yes, we think CDC Husky looks very good, but of course, when we have a target, we shoot for it and try to pick material that's better through regular breeding. I think the key thing might be, a green pea with better root rot resistance. That if it can also bring along reasonable agronomics and quality, that could be one way to beat CDC Husky.
That's a good point. Okay, when breeding data and or RVT data are fungicides used on all the pulse types and insecticides for aphids when needed? Anyone that'd like to comment on that one?
I can make a quick comment and others can jump in. Basically, well, let's say for the co-op test that we are coordinating, we tell the cooperators to use best management practices for their region. So if their region would apply a fungicide on pea, then go ahead. If you see aphids that are getting to be too high of a population and best management practices would say put an insecticide, then the cooperator should do it. So that's the type of approach that we're using.
Right. Yeah, I know that in the RVTs, we have protocols that do require the use of fungicides. Some crops, it would be mandatory, and then others, it's as needed. But in regional variety trials, we're looking for yield potential. So we want to make sure that the varieties have the best opportunity to show that potential. Okay, another question on black seed-coated lentils. Would they be usable as a decorticated red lentil, and will they break down upon cooking like normal decorticated red lentils do?
Yeah, first I have to say that this is our very first lentil variety, black seed coated register. I mean, other than Indian head. So there are differences, and there will be differences among varieties. And I think I had a great conversation with Laurie and other people about it. So I would say to begin with, in general, black seed coated lentils retain their shape. I would say similar to what a French green lentil will look like cooked. So no, in general, it will not fully become mushy or break down. It keeps shapes much better than any of the other red lentils.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, I've heard that there are ongoing trials in chickpeas for white varieties. Any updates, and what are the current interesting results compared to existing varieties?
Yeah, so we try to bring this new type of chickpeas with a really wide. The reason is that there's market, especially in Spain and Portugal. They call it blanco lechoso or white milk type of chickpeas, and very high price in those regions. So I started brought in like 20 years ago when we started doing chickpeas, and the reason that market, but the varieties, the source for distilled is really highly susceptible to ascochyta and very late maturing. So we kind of continuing making selection, and there's some yield trials in 2025, but still will be taking a few more years before we release into any variety of the white cotyledon, can really white this type of chickpeas. Okay, so just wait and stay tuned with the program.
Great, thank you. So another question on peas. Are there new forage varieties and also maple pea varieties coming? They commented that beef producers are becoming more involved in using forage varieties with the value of beef increasing.
I can make a comment. Yes, there are forage and maple pea options in the seed guide right now. In addition, we released a new forage pea in 2025 to Cantera, high biomass, small seed size, good lodging resistance. And in research conducted with Dr. Billigatu a couple of years ago, we saw good results for pea mixed with oat or barley as a flexible kind of annual forage. And on maple pea, we released a new one to Secan in 2025 with good yield, good lodging resistance, and small seeds. It seems the maple pea market likes the small seed size of the old variety CDC Acer. So this one is a little bigger than that, but not much. So it's in that range.
It's good to hear. So any idea about nitrous oxide emissions associated with pea, soybean, and lentil production? Who would like to start with that one?
I can maybe comment on that. I mean, what I do know about it is that pulses will definitely produce some, but in amounts that are even hard to quantify and much less than cereals, let's say, to compare. So I don't think we really quantified it in the system, but like other chems jump in if they have any specific, like more specific to this information.
It's less
I think
than
go ahead.
it's less than others, which is, I think,
Yeah.
the important thing to share within this group.
Right.
That's what I was going to say as well, because in pulses, you're not applying any or very little nitrogen fertilizer, and I think it's at that end fertilizer stage where you have the most chance for emissions. So pulses are quite friendly in that way.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I think that's the end of the, oh, wait, one more question just popped up. So, question on winter peas. Do you have any food grade winter pea breeding in progress? And if not, how far are we from winter survivability versus other zones where winter peas are coming more often? Tom, did you want to comment on that one?
I can, but maybe Jaenet wants to. Maybe Limagrain is breeding winter pea in Europe. In our program, we haven't really touched much on winter pea. We played with it a wee bit, but our colleagues in southern Alberta ran several trials over 4 or 5 years, and winter survival was very iffy. They used some recent lines from the Pacific Northwest in the U.S. So they would get survival in Lethbridge, but let's say not as you went much further north. So for us, it's at a distance. I know in southern parts of Europe, it is a thing, and it's gaining some popularity. Maybe Jaenet, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so there is a small part of winter pea breeding for Limagrain in Europe, mostly centered in France. We haven't touched on winter peas in Saskatchewan because if it gets -30, -40, there's not much that will survive here. But in France, they'll survive in -10, just not the extreme levels that we're seeing here. So maybe something for the future.
Yeah, good point. And I think some of those extreme temperatures are coming for the weekend. Here's a question. How would you compare and recommend erect versus bushy plant type varieties in pulses for Saskatchewan, specifically in peas and chickpeas?
So
Did you want
maybe
to talk about the peas, or Anna or Jaenet, I mean?
I can comment on peas specifically because I've been comparing some European and Canadian varieties, and I found that eventually it all goes back to yield. So even if you see them in the field, it doesn't matter how nice they look. The ones from Europe are very bushy at the start, and then the ones in Canada are a little later. But they'll fill up eventually, and are a bit more bushier at the end, and the ones from Europe are a bit more erect. But eventually, the Canadian ones win still, even though they don't look like it at the start. So I wouldn't make any recommendations based on that. Not sure if Tom has cracked the code on visually predicting yields. But for us, no.
I guess I would just say overall, we want good lodging resistance. We want them to stand through the season. So I think we have looked a little bit at the concept of basal branching. So, and yes, as Jaenet said, some varieties, maybe especially more European types, tend to have less branches and they appear more erect. The jury's out on that. The main thing is to have enough biomass and enough standability to give to support the crop to get good yield.
That's good. And Bunyamin, do you have some comments on chickpeas?
Sure, yeah. So in general, we are directing the selection toward the kind of erect type, because the erect type is kind of, you are more efficient when you combine, so feeding well with the machinery that we use here. Okay, the bushy type, actually there's an advantage. You get more biomass, so you get more yield. So at the end, we kind of compromise between the two, what we call semi-erect. Okay, the bushy type in chickpeas is one of the limitations with the bushy type is hard to control when you have ascochyta, because you're not going to be effective spraying fungicide when it is bushy, and it's not effective when it combines. So we like to have plant a bit upright and a bit more biomass. So we are in between. So what we call like semi-erect. That's what we do in chickpeas. So we like to have that varieties coming.
For that. So do any of these pulse breeding programs develop lines or traits well suited for irrigated production? And are any irrigated productions being evaluated? Who would like to start with that one?
Soybeans love irrigation.
They like their moisture, don't they?
And
so
comment that. Go ahead.
And so do fava beans. They are very thirsty.
I think most of the
they are.
trial and irrigation is on dry beans. So Kirsten is not here. That's most of the production of common bean in the irrigated areas.
Yeah. And in the regional variety trials, we have a few irrigated sites. We have one for Faba bean, and also, we have several crops being grown at Outlook that are, so including soybean and peas that have some irrigation. And Tom, I think you've got some irrigation going on at the university as well. So there is some evaluation being done.
Yeah, definitely. With our soybeans, we have many of our plots under irrigation. Same with the dry bean, as Bunyamin mentioned. With pea, not so much. Pea can be grown under irrigation. That's not an issue, but I think commercially not many pea acres are grown under irrigation, so we don't really emphasize that so much in our breeding program. But yeah.
All right, thanks. Is there any data on nitrogen saving costs for faba beans?
Maybe a metric that I can share for sure is that we know that faba beans fix about 200 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, I think is the number that I have. So to put that in perspective and maybe to compare to a crop that I am also working on is like that's 5 times what lentils can fix in nitrogen. It's just an insane amount. So I will say that really represents a very alternative, a very attractive alternative. So when we think in terms of the crop requirement, I will say is like definitely more than 90% of the nitrogen that the crop needs can be acquired through fixation. And maybe also think about faba beans has a very good option to manage aphanomyces root rot or root rot in general. So it's a very good alternative right now.
Absolutely, I agree. Does anyone else have any further questions?
That was our last one, Laurie. I think we've done a pretty good job at digging into every crop presented today. So feel free to move us right along and close out the webinar.
That's great. Yeah, I think that was a great Q&A session. So again, I'd like to thank all our presenters and our attendees. That's a wrap for this year's Pulse Variety Seminar. Be sure to watch for an email from us following this event, as it will include a link to watch the recording. It will also have a link to a survey for you to share your feedback on this event, and we really appreciate any feedback you can provide. Your opinion helps SPG deliver valuable extension opportunities. And finally, just a reminder that registration is now open for SPG's Winter Pulse meetings. We will be making stops in Saskatoon, Southie, and Swift Current in February. So check our website at saspulse.com for more information. So thanks again and have a very good day. Getting